Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening from wherever you are coming. My name is Laura Clark Murray. I'm the Chief Operations Officer with Omdena. I have the great pleasure of hosting this event today. I'm really excited about it. Today we're talking about acting on the tremendous potential that artificial intelligence offers in the social change sector. Breakthroughs in technology together with the explosion of data means solutions are possible to some of the world's thorniest problems. And that's very exciting. However, there are definitely challenges to becoming an AI-enabled organization and risks to consider. And AI and machine learning are certainly not answers to every problem. Though used properly, these technologies have the potential to significantly boost and broaden the impact of NGOs. And we're excited to have you here today with some guests to talk about just those things. So first, I'd like to explain a bit about the logistics of this session. After this brief intro, I'll share just a little bit about Omdena, who we are and how we do our work. And then I'll introduce Claudia Yush. She's the CEO of the Cloudera Foundation, and Claudia will be giving some opening remarks. This will be followed by a brief overview of a few Omdena case studies, which are examples of overcoming some of the roadblocks that NGOs typically face in adopting AI. And then we'll get into the panel discussion. We have some fantastic guests here today, and we'll be asking questions of them and having a discussion and taking your questions for them. And I'll introduce our panelists in a bit. I do want to point out that this session is being recorded and it will be shared on omdena.com in the days ahead. So let's first, a few words about Omdena. We were founded in May of 2019, so not that long ago. But we were founded on a few key ideas. What if we were to bring together AI and domain experts from around the world to collaborate on projects that really mattered to them and give them the opportunity to do the kind of work that they want to do in the world? And what if we were to provide a framework and a set of tools in which their work could be self-directed, where they could work from the bottom up to drive solutions and deliver their own creativity and use that as a structure in which innovation could happen? And what if we then match those teams of AI experts with the people and the organizations that are domain experts, that are faced with tackling these thorny and significant problems around the world? And that's what we've gone about doing. We've created a platform for teams of diverse experts from around the globe to work together, to collaborate, to deal with these very important and challenging problems facing humanity. And we've done it in a way that's accessible to those organizations, to nonprofits, NGOs, and others who have the mission to make the world a better place. So in the 15 months since we've launched, we have executed on 26 projects across many sectors with partners that include UN agencies, many NGOs, startups, foundations, and corporations. And through this process, we've brought together more than 1,300 people, experts in AI, data science, machine learning, and domain experts, to work in groups of about 50 on our intensive 8-week projects. And within our framework, those teams work in a bottom-up fashion so that they're self-directing the development. And we've seen time and again the impact of bringing together people who have vastly different experiences in their professions and in their lives. Our teams are typically 30% or more female. On any project, we'll have 14 or more countries represented, and people are working from all over the world. So this diversity, together with our bottom-up approach, not only fosters creativity and innovation, and it most certainly does, it also leads to more ethical and trusted results. I just want to say I would be happy to answer any questions you have about Omdena, and at some point I'll provide my email, and feel free to reach out if you'd like to understand more about how we work. But our focus today is to hear from some people who are immersed in this world of the NGO and the problems you try to solve. And today we're delighted to have with us Claudia Yush. She's the founding CEO of the Cloudera Foundation, which is based in Silicon Valley. Working with partners around the globe, her team supports large-scale, data-driven opportunities to address the world's pressing challenges in any area of critical need, such as in health, the environment, economic inequality, education, and more. She is pioneering a foundation model that combines intellectual capital and private sector expertise with grants to help nonprofits realize impactful data capabilities. Previously, Claudia was an executive at Rockefeller Foundation and Deutsche Bank. So at this point, I will hand it over to Claudia, who will take it from here. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Laura. Thanks so much for the kind introduction, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone, depending on where you are. I'm going to share my screen. Let's see, this should be here. Let me know if you can see it. Looks good. So you already heard, I'm currently the CEO of the Cloudera Foundation, but in my previous role, I was the head of strategic insights at the Rockefeller Foundation. And there I was responsible for identifying big ideas and interventions that could be developed into a $100 million initiative for the Rockefeller Foundation. And as my team and I were investigating opportunities to make a difference on food security or energy poverty and youth unemployment and other complex challenges, one possible lever came up time and time again: the use of data. And seeing that potential contribution data use can make to achieving impact on large-scale problems was really what drew me to my current role as the CEO of the Cloudera Foundation. The Cloudera Foundation is unique in the sense that we only focus on the nonprofit use of data. We were established in 2017, and since then, my colleagues and I have spoken with more than 300 nonprofit organizations across the globe and across many sectors. Those conversations have truly informed and guided the model that we are using today, which focuses not only on the successful completion of data projects, but also, and equally important, on building the capacity and strengthening the data capacity within our grantee organizations. So I said earlier that the potential of data to make progress on complex problems was really what brought me to this field. For those of you in the audience, and I understand those are many who are data scientists and data analysts, that won't be a big revelation. But for those of you who work at nonprofits, regardless of your size, this will likely raise many questions ranging from where to start to how to use data responsibly. And all of those questions are valid. So what do I mean when I say data? I mean, nonprofits have collected information on beneficiaries, a word that I not particularly like, but use as a placeholder for something better. And donors have used that information for decades, mainly for monitoring and evaluation purposes. But when I'm thinking of the potential of data, I'm thinking of a true step change in terms of the volume of data when we use sensors, for example, to collect data and information on soil quality, its velocity when we look at financial transactions taking place every second to improve the financial inclusion of women, and variety, our ability, and combine that information with satellite images and census databases. We have more data and we have more ways to use it beyond crunching numbers in Excel and creating Venn diagrams. This means that in the ideal case, we can have better evidence faster on what works and what doesn't, leading to more efficient delivery of services, nimbler course corrections, and perhaps a shorter time to impact. These new data capabilities also offer an opportunity to use new types of data and or combine different types of data to generate insights. For example, to fill in gaps in areas where the availability of data has been a challenge. And I mean, even though we are talking about exploding data volumes, that is not always the case for all the regions we work in, or where data has been hard to collect, for example, in regions affected by conflict. This can help us understand complex problems better, and therefore we may be better able to address what's causing them sooner. We may no longer be required to wait 20 years or to have 20 years of longitudinal data to back a hunch about a critical but slow-moving threat. It can also help to identify and target who is most at risk and direct limited resources more effectively. Personally, I'm very excited about opportunities to detect patterns that weren't visible using earlier methods to generate truly new insights and ways to solve problems. For example, human trafficking organizations have found new ways to use data on illicit financial flows to identify human trafficking hotspots, something that would not have been possible only a decade ago. You get the sense that I'm passionate and enthusiastic about the potential for the expanded use of data in the nonprofit space, but I'm also a realist and a practitioner. For the use of complex data, it's still early days in the nonprofit sector. For example, there are different ways to categorize analytical approaches. One way to talk about it is descriptive, to call them descriptive, predictive, and prescriptive analytics. Most of the more than 300 nonprofit organizations we have talked with over the last 2.5 years use data for descriptive analysis, which aims to answer the question, what happened? Did more patients show up for their appointments when they received a specific wording of a text message? This is a good entry point for nonprofits and still within the organizational comfort zone of using data for evaluation and monitoring purposes. Predictive analytics, which tries to answer the question, what might happen, is already much less common. Examples of use cases include forecasting disease outbreaks, areas of droughts and water pump failure, or the most secure routes to deliver food and medication in an active conflict zone. Prescriptive analytics suggests an action based on that forecast. Basically, the question here is, what should we do if this happens? There are only few nonprofit organizations who are exploring the use of prescriptive analysis. For example, to look into suggesting different treatment options for addicts, depending on their individual circumstances, location, and the success rates of people with a similar personal history and characteristics. All three of these approaches have data privacy and governance implications that will need to be explored and managed as appropriate for each and every specific data use case. Predictive and prescriptive analytics in particular will require to work to understand whether the data is a fair representation of the communities you want to serve, which, like other steps in the data journey, will demand active involvement of those communities, which also means the community members must be informed about and trusting of your processes. If your project benefits from the application of more advanced data analytics, you will likely need a certain volume and data from reliable sources to be able to make predictions that hold up in the real world. Sample size does matter. What else do you need to keep in mind when you are considering a data project? Again, as a realist and practitioner, and especially during a pandemic that affects nonprofit funding left and right, take the time to tease out why the data use case is important to your program / your organization. What is the problem that you are trying to solve? How does data relate to it? Do you have access to the necessary data? Developing a hypothesis of how data could assist you in achieving impact will require practical work and someone within your organization who knows the data, who understands its cleanliness, its gaps, its representativeness of the data sets in question. We at the Cloudera Foundation are supporting this type of work through a new program called the Data for Change Accelerator. In the Accelerator program, we are working with nonprofit organizations for 6 months on testing that type of hypothesis that I just described. But while we provide expertise, technology, and financial support as needed, I want to emphasize that the grantee organization will do most of the work, because only you know the problem and only you know your data inside out. That's one reason. The other reason is that at the end of the 6 months project, we want to leave the grantee organization in a better position than before, with stronger and more advanced data capabilities so that you can continue to work on your data problem and continue to iterate on it, since data challenges often require many iterations. I saved the most important point for last. We have done theory of change exercises with nonprofits specifically focused on data use. And while participants could often articulate the data questions, speak to the necessary data sets and so on and so forth, they couldn't always make a strong case of why governments, patients, or other beneficiaries would take action on data. Or in other words, what incentives will really trigger different behaviors across all stakeholders, including beneficiaries and key decision makers, in light of new evidence. Ultimately, as my friend Stefan Freiholz from GovLab always says, there's a lot to consider when using data, not least the risk associated with not using it. Thank you, and I look forward to the panel discussion later on.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Claudia, for those comments. Super helpful for framing this discussion today. And yes, to everyone, Claudia will be part of the panel. So if you do have questions for Claudia based on her opening remarks, feel free to put them in the chat. And it would be terrific if you could identify that it's a question for Claudia. So as we're going through the questions that come up, we know. Let me go back to my screen here. Okay, so as I mentioned earlier, at Omdena, we're working on our 26th project, our 26th AI project in the 16 months since we've launched. And we've been working with organizations, large and small, to tackle issues central to each of our partners' missions. And we've learned some things about the challenges that NGOs typically face as they explore the possibilities of using AI and data science in their world, and as they face the realities of the data needed to address those problems. So we thought we would spend about 10 minutes sharing a high-level overview of just a few of those projects. And our hope here is that you'll see some parallels between these projects and your world. So at this point, I'm going to hand this off to my Omdena colleague, Rosana de Oliveira Gomez. She is a superb lead machine engineer who's been dedicating her considerable skills to the humanitarian space. We're so thrilled that she has dedicated such time to Omdena. She has been a machine learning engineer on multiple projects, and she's also taken leadership roles on numerous projects, and now within Omdena itself. So I couldn't be happier to have her as a partner, and I'm going to hand this off to her.
So So hello again, and today I'm going to share a little bit of the lessons learned from all these 26 projects from Omdena, and especially how used AI for social impact in collaboration with NGOs. So I'll start with the topic of not having a clear idea of how AI and data science can help organizations. And for this, I'm going to talk about two open-ended projects, one done with the Zero Abuse Project and another one done with the Color of the World. So in the project in partnership with the Zero Abuse Project, the team addressed the question of, can we use AI to uncover the behavior of child sexual predators in education environments? So in the United States, it is estimated by the time students graduate from high school, about 10% of them will have experienced sexual misconduct by a school employee. And on top of that, whenever sexual abuse takes place at large organizations such as in churches or universities, it is quite common that misconduct is covered up as an attempt to preserve the institution's reputation. So in this project, our team at Omdena applied AI techniques to investigate data from these large organizations, these large institutions, and especially in the education world, such as high schools and academia, or for example, as universities and colleges. So our analysis has shown that AI techniques can be successful to uncover the behavior of sexual predators in this educational context. And moreover, that how the institutions where these predators work respond to this, such as, for example, relocating molesters to other departments and so on. So the results of this work are now the basis for future work by Zero Abuse. So now in the project in partnership with Color of the World, another Omdena team worked in addressing the question, how can those suffering from PTSD in low resource environments be supported using AI? So PTSD is a mental health condition that affects millions of people across the world, and that can be triggered in people who experienced severely traumatic events. So in particular, in war or refugee zones, where there is a lack of medical or psychology professionals, people may not even be aware of experience of these conditions, and let alone seek for treatment. So in this project, the team created a machine learning driven chatbot that talks to the users and determines a risk assessment for PTSD. So this is one way to show that AI can be helpful to improve the lives of people who suffer from mental health. But in this project particularly, we didn't only have the question of how AI can be helpful for the organization, but the team also faced other challenges, which leads me to the next topic that I want to discuss, which is, after overcoming not knowing what AI can do for an NGO, the NGO might not have enough available data. So within the same project with the Color of the World, that was the case for the team. There was no data initially in the project. So the question is, what can you do when there is no data available? And in this case, they just went out to get it. So the team looked into public social media messages, interviewed patients who suffered from PTSD, and leveraged the power of community to access anonymous PTSD interview transcripts. So the lesson learned here was, there is always data somewhere. So now in this project done in collaboration with the Sex Field, which is an NGO from Poland, that we tackled the topic of sex education and answered the question, how can the hidden concerns of youth about taboo subjects can be uncovered with AI? So sex education is virtually outlawed in Poland, and this leaves young people uneducated and misinformed in ways that can have a huge impact in their lives, and also in terms of violence against groups of people, spread of diseases, teenage pregnancy, and also mental health. So because this topic is such a taboo in Poland, there was very little data available to work with. And to overcome this challenge, the team created a survey which the partner shared with the followers on Instagram and Facebook. And because the partner is also an influencer in Poland, they received almost 30,000 responses from young people about their problems, confusions, and concerns regarding sex education. And so in this case, they were able to create data, and the analysis from this data that was created has helped sex field to gain insights on the impact of lack of sexual education or sex education on youth. And the future goal is to use these insights to push the government in Poland, to policy changes in terms of this topic. So here the lessons we learned is, if you don't have data, you can always create it. So then, the third project that I'm going to talk about, the topic of data, was, and also in the context of policies, was the project carried out in collaboration with the World Institute, which focused on how to identify conflicts that are getting in the way of land restoration via AI techniques. So environmental conflicts related to natural resources, land, and wildlife affect societies and economies all over the world. And India is the country that is most affected by it, and it has millions of people that are affected by it. So in this project, the team also started without any data, and but they easily cover this problem, overcame this problem by collecting publicly available data sources. So this is another way of dealing with not available data. In this case, they used local newspapers, local news articles, and they built an AI-driven visualization application that matches land conflict events identified from these news articles with government policies to mediate such conflicts. So the technology developed in this project is used regularly by WRI, providing data-driven insights to guide their work in local governments in India, and also they are planning to apply this to other regions in the world as well. So now, after employing AI methods in projects for NGOs and finding out about how we can find data and so on, we can still ask ourselves the question of how does AI add value to these organizations and like to change the way things are done. So in the project in partnership to the World Food Programme Innovation Accelerator, our team worked in how to innovate cyclone management operations with AI. So this was a project that I had the privilege to be part of. And whenever a cyclone takes place, the WFP is one of the first humanitarian agencies to arrive, providing supplies such as water, food, and blankets to the affected populations. So in this project, our team created a machine learning model to estimate the number of populations affected by cyclones, which was then matched to estimate the number of food and non-food items that they need, that the WFP needs to deploy in their operations. So our model has demonstrated how AI can be innovative, an innovative approach to solve WFP operations. And the prototype application created in this project is now being used to show value to stakeholders and also gather support and resources within the organizations to implement innovative solutions for disaster response. So also in the direction of guiding organization decisions, the project in partnership with the Foundation BottomUp aimed to understand the sentiments, thoughts, and aspirations of children and young people all over the world. And one of the goals of Foundation BottomUp is to use technology to improve the health and well-being of young people. And in this project, the Omdena team gathered public social media posts from young people and gained insights about how they see the future in which they will be living in. So here, the value came from the informative aspect of applying AI in this project. So the results obtained from this analysis of the social media posts are helping Foundation Aboutenna to drive their projects and funding plans for the future, taking consideration the group of people that they are aiming to help, which is a little bit in the direction of what Claudia just mentioned before. And now in the last project that I will be showing today, another Omdena team collaborated with Safe City to work in the question how to guide women to take safe routes through urban environments using AI techniques. So it is estimated that 1 in every 3 women faces some sort of sexual assault at least once in their lifetime. In India, it is estimated that women are raped every 20 minutes. So on top of that, most of the cases of sexual assault are usually not reported. So in this project, we worked with Safe City, which is a platform which maps reports of sexual assaults from anonymous reports, and also together with geographical information. And by combining this data from Safe City, the Safe City app, together with other open source data, the team used AI techniques to identify and rate the risk of different locations within a city that can be a potential place for sexual assault. And thanks to this, they managed to create and not only build, but also deploy an AI-driven technology which helps women to take safe routes through cities in India daily. And this has an immediate impact and value in the product that was created. So after all that we learned from these projects and many others that I didn't have the time, of course, to mention here, it is quite straightforward to understand why the collaborative bottom-up approach that we follow here at Omdena works. So first, our global community acts as an ideas incubator to better understand the potential of AI for organizations. And this is done through the brainstorming of dozens of collaborators from all over the world and from completely diverse backgrounds. So we also overcome data challenges by leveraging the community to search, collect, and even create data when data is not available. And finally, our community has a broad spectrum of knowledge and expertise, both from domain and technical backgrounds, which is in the core of our innovation solutions. So this is why the bottom-up approach that Omdena takes is so powerful. So with that, I would like to thank you all, and over back to you, Laura.
Okay, thank you, Hosanna, so much. Let's see. I need to bring up my slide. Okay. Great. Okay, thank you, Hosanna. And now we're going to move on to our panel discussion. I'm so excited to have some fantastic people with us today, and I'm really excited for you to hear what they have to say. So let me do some quick introductions, and then we'll dive right in. So you have met Claudia. I want to introduce John Zoltner. John is obsessed with finding new ways to apply technology and innovation to make the world a better place. He leads the Technology for Development and Innovation practice at Save the Children, a large worldwide NGO. Their vision is a world in which every child attains the right to survival, protection, development, and participation. Next, I'd like to introduce Amy Paul. Amy is an emerging technology advisor for USAID, which is the lead US government agency that works to end extreme global poverty and enable resilient democratic societies to realize their potential. So Amy helps to drive awareness of emerging technologies in developing countries and facilitates adoption of those technologies in ways that assure effectiveness while minimizing risks. And next, I'd like to introduce Perry Hena. Perry's passion and purpose is to help organizations put their human capital to work to deliver on both their own goals and to make progress in achieving the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals. Perry co-founded the Zero Hunger Lab in 2019 to use data science to fight hunger, and by partnering with organizations like the World Food Program and Oxfam. I'm going to start this by asking each of our panelists some questions, and I invite you to ask your own questions in the chat. And as I mentioned, it would really be great if you could indicate if your question is directed to one or another of the panelists. And then as we get going, I'll weave some of your questions into the discussion. I think for the sake of this, I will take my screen share off so that we can see the faces of folks as they're speaking. Okay, so I am going to start with you, John. You bring the perspective of being in an NGO, and you're someone who's grappling with the challenges and the potential of AI within your own organization. And you're currently doing an AI project with Omdena. So I want to start by talking about partnerships. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about Save the Children's objectives for this project that you're doing with Omdena, and what you've learned about how to work with AI.
Sure. Well, it's been an extraordinary process so far. It's making me more obsessed with how to use technology to solve the world's problems, because the topic we're looking at is online child exploitation and abuse, and it's a problem that we've been working on for about 20 years. We've run hotlines for reporting online child exploitation, but it's always changing. As technology changes, the problem changes and gets worse in many ways. So we're working with the Omdena group in order to understand the rate of incidences of online violence against children. And also we're finding especially information about grooming, because there are thousands of data sources, and we have this group of AI professionals who are really working on this program around the clock because they live all over the world. So there's never a moment when there aren't at least several people trying to solve this issue for us. And one big lesson has been that it's not all about AI or even technology. What's really helpful to us are the domain experts who can give their opinion about what data can help us make the right conclusions about what's going on. Because it's not the data scientists that do that. The data scientists help find the data and analyze it by using tools like natural language processing in order to understand where kind of keywords or phrases or concepts are appearing, and how we can understand the sentiment of how people are talking about this kind of abuse.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for that, John. And that actually leads right into something I wanted to ask Amy. At USAID, you're paving the way, as I understand it, for NGOs around the world to embrace AI in a smart and safe way. And John is very involved in the partnership between Save the Children and Omdena. And I'm curious what kind of guidance you would give an NGO about partnering with data science and technology organizations. So what level of involvement do you recommend when it comes to designing and building machine learning applications?
Great, thanks so much. I think the jury's out on whether we're paving the way or not, but thank you for the sentiment. I think, you know, I just wanted to pick up on a couple of things that John said, because I think what we try to communicate is that as much as you may identify not as a data scientist, you know, playing a very active role and participating in the decisions, not just at the end of the process, but shaping how are we defining the problem? What is it that we're actually trying to predict? What are the limitations in the data we have? Understanding what might happen if there are model failures, or the machine learning or AI tool that you have doesn't work as intended, are all things that those domain experts are going to be really well placed to answer, more so than the data scientists. And oftentimes, you know, those domain experts are you all sitting in the NGOs, knowing the country context where you work, knowing where the data came from, knowing the kinds of larger ecosystem patterns and events that you're going to have to implement your solution within. And so we've spent a lot of time trying to message that even if you are not a data scientist, and often, especially because you're not a data scientist, you have other kinds of expertise that are really, really critical to using this technology well, right? And you know, being part of that solution, looking for partners that will communicate with you on a regular basis, that are willing to have those discussions with you around how to make decisions, around including or excluding certain types of data, around figuring out what kinds of accuracy metrics are appropriate for your project, and figuring out what kinds of decisions you make all during that process of designing and developing a solution are going to make it something that actually works in the context of the problem that our NGOs are responding to every day. So I would say a very high level of engagement, seeing yourself as part of that team, trying to stay away from these silos of data scientists and technology people over there and development people over here. It really needs to be a close partnership. And I think, you know, especially now because data science is relatively new, we often don't have a whole lot of organizations that are equally skilled in both of those areas, right? We are looking at partnerships where you bring really talented data scientists with really talented development professionals, and making sure that you have a partnership model where you can work collaboratively, respect each other's points of view, bring in lots of different perspectives, understand just how critical having that domain expertise is really what's going to make it work and result in solutions that are effective, sustainable, and responsible, you know, mitigating all the potential risks that come with jumping on technology too quickly. So
okay,
that's what we would say.
Yeah, that's excellent guidance. And I want to pick up on that and turn it over to you, Perry, because in your work with Zero Hunger, you're hands-on with many organizations, helping them with their data science efforts to combat hunger. And I'm interested in how the points that John and Amy have brought up, how this connects with what you're seeing in your partnerships. You know, what are some of the key learnings in working together with an organization, let's say like the UN World Food Program?
Okay, thank you, Laura. Yeah, and hello to all. I think we have close to 130 people on this event, so really nice to have so many listeners. Yeah, some key learnings from working with the World Food Program. Maybe just a quick explanation on the Zero Hunger Lab. What we try to do is unlock the power of data science for SDG 2. SDG 2, Sustainable Development Goal number 2, is Zero Hunger. And of course, that's also at the heart of what the World Food Program tries to do already for 60 years. And sometimes they're really successful, but probably you remember, or maybe not, that the World Food Program, when it was initiated by President Johnson in the early 60s, that it was a temporary organization. It should be there for 3 to 5 years was the initial idea. But it's still there because we still have a lot of crises like war or natural disaster. So working together with such an organization and introducing data science was not easy, because focus on emergency relief, on saving lives, means also that the operations are really focused on helping quickly, on being ready whenever a disaster or war hits people in need. So what we did as an introduction to explain the power of data science to these people that are working in the field is a game. And we modeled a situation in South Sudan. I don't know if there's any people from South Sudan or know the situation in South Sudan. But since the existence of the country, it has been struggling, and there was war and conflict and drought, and food security, food and nutrition security is a huge issue. And what we basically did is get the World Food Programme people around the table, play a game for 1 hour, a simple game, just deciding on do we spend money, and money is always restricted in organizations like the World Food Programme. Budgets are limited. Do we spend our money on building roads? Do we spend our money on buying food? Do we spend our money on operating with trucks or planes? And just these couple of variables, these uncertainties for the situation in South Sudan, the people thought, okay, we can fix that. But working with a team of operations experts that have 20 to 30 years experience in working in places like South Sudan, they were able to come up with some reasonable solutions. But if you put the same variables and apply some smart algorithms, any computer, even your mobile phone, can come up with a better solution in just seconds. And I think that kind of introduction really helped to convince the people within the World Food Programme that they could use the power of data science. And what we did then is we created, for example, a solution which is called Optimus, which basically changed the supply chain of emergency food, food and nutrition security. And we achieved some great results, not by just optimizing the supply chains, but also by putting these supply chains upside down. So starting from the people in need, what do they need every day in their food basket? And based on data science, and the big data, handling big data is not a problem. So we came up with an emergency need program for 6 million people in Syria, for example, based on what they really need, and sourcing also locally.
And Perry, do you think that you could maybe provide a pointer in the chat to where, if people are interested in learning more about the details of that work, because that sounds fascinating, do you have any, if you have any kind of link that you want to put in the chat for everyone, that would be really,
okay, yeah,
really helpful. Okay, thank you. And now I'd like to, Claudia, I want to shift to a question based on your opening remarks. You mentioned data gaps, you know, that despite this explosion of data all around us, that, you know, there are always gaps. And especially I'm thinking for maybe the smaller or medium-sized NGO who might be looking at, you know, a problem that they believe AI could really help with, but they're constrained, they don't have the data. I've heard in the past you talk a bit about thinking about your own data assets, and I'm wondering if you have some thoughts on what that might look like. What should a small or medium-sized NGO, how should they approach that problem?
Just wanted to also second a couple of things that were mentioned earlier. I mean, using data is definitely a team sport, and involves not only data scientists but program people. Often what we find when we talk to nonprofits, that there is maybe a data analyst attached to the monitoring and evaluation unit, and it's seen as the role of the evaluation and monitoring unit to kind of take care of the data, kind of find ways to use the data, and we probably have to overcome that. So that's just an aside. But talking about data gaps, it really starts with the problem definition. I mean, what is the problem that you want to solve, and why do you believe that data can help you really make kind of significant progress on that? And then thinking about what are the types of data that would help you to create an indicator or whatever it is that you need. And then kind of going out and thinking about what are the proxies. So you may not have the data, you might not have kind of current census data. You might not have the health data that you need. You haven't collected them as an organization, and they might not be out there easily accessible. But are there public data sets or other data sets that you could access in partnership that would give you those insights? I mean, I'm also starting to see data collaborations between nonprofits. So let's say one organization is focused on a specific health problem, another one is focused on nutrition. And so kind of looking at those two verticals together can elicit new insights. But it obviously also comes with kind of new challenges around how do you manage data security and privacy that then need to be taken into account. But it's basically looking to fill data gaps for unconventional sources. One of our grantees is Aid Data. They use satellite images, for example, in the DRC to answer questions, because it's hard to collect often in the DRC data actively on the ground. Those are some of the examples.
Excellent, thank you. I think that's really nice practical steps that someone can start with. And the first thing you mentioned is starting with the problem definition. And I want to turn this question over to John, and then I'm going to take a few questions from the attendees, and the time is just flying here. My goodness. But you mentioned it starts with the problem definition. And John, I'm wondering if you have some thoughts about framing a problem framing a problem and for AI and machine learning use.
Sure. That's been a big issue in our first 2 weeks of this project, because I think there's kind of a give and take between the sectoral experts and the data experts, where not all data is available, as we said. And even when data is available, we need to know we're able to process it, excuse me, in a way that will allow us to determine meaning and make conclusions based on it. So I went into the project knowing what I wanted, but not knowing really what part of what I want was possible. So it took really scouring the internet for any potential data set that could be conceivably related to online violence against children, then looking at what those are, looking at how we can process them in order to make them more meaningful to us, and then figuring out, can we make valid conclusions based on this data? And that helps you figure out what problem you can address, what's the full scope of the problem you can address, because you can't answer every question, but you can likely answer a lot of the problem you're looking at.
Okay, thank you, John. That was really, really helpful. I'm going to take a question. I just scrolled past it. Let's see. Okay, question from Arthur to Amy and to John. And I'm going to ask you to be relatively quick, and then we'll do another quick question for everyone. If the domain experts are the default decision makers at the end of the day in terms of analysis, and we've talked about how critical it is for the folks within the NGOs and the domain experts to be very, very involved, what role does data science play in terms of problem discovery? And any concrete examples would help. Does that make sense? So let's go to Amy first.
Well, I would say, I mean, coming up with how you are going to take your development problem and turn it into a modeling problem for machine learning should be a collaborative discussion, right? You need the domain experts to say, here's how we currently understand what's lacking with the status quo, what the problem is and what we're not able to do as well as we want, and the data scientists to help you understand what is it that you need in order to create a model? What are going to be the limitations of what it can predict and what it can't? What are some of the decisions that you're going to have to make in choosing a target variable? And then it goes back to the domain expertise to think through the trade-offs of what it means to choose one over the other. So, for example, if you're thinking about a problem of saying, you know, I want to, say, in education or hiring, come up with a model that's going to help predict which candidates for jobs are going to most succeed in certain jobs, you have to decide what variable you're going to use for success, right? Are you looking for people who get an interview? Are you looking for people who get hired? Are you looking for people who are retained in the job for a certain number of years? All of those things have a different set of assumptions about what it means, and you really need to work together to figure out what's going to be most valuable to your organization. What is it that it's going to help you solve, and what are the things that you're still going to have to make judgment calls or have limitations with later on, which will help you think about how you integrate the results of that model into practice. So I would say it's really a collaborative process, and it takes both knowing what's capable with machine learning and understanding the context in which you're going to use it.
Okay, and John, do you have anything you want to add to that?
Sure, I think I mostly answered that in the last time I spoke, but a little more detail is when we were looking at our problem, I wanted to quantify the amount of online violence against children. And it's really not possible to kind of do an indicator, but we can show over time using some indicators how it's relatively changed, you know, if it's grown in COVID, for example. And then we also found that it's easier for us to get access to information about potential grooming behaviors in game chats or on social media, and to use natural language processing to be able to kind of quantify and also explain how grooming happens. And that wasn't really the focus in the beginning, but it's something that really interests us. So we're really focusing on that also now.
Okay, thank you. All right, the time here has flown, and I wish we could keep going, but I'm going to wrap up with a final question for each of you, and we'll start with you, Claudia. Where would you like to see AI used in the world? You know, what problems are you? What's a problem that you're seeing that you can see that advances in data science and AI and availability of data would allow that problem to be tackled? Just something, wondering if anything comes to mind. And that's the same question for all of you. So we'll start with Claudia, and then I'll ask Perry after that.
So obviously my answer is subjective, because there are so many areas where data can be meaningfully deployed. I'm personally intrigued by opportunities to use AI and machine learning in the field of agriculture, because so many food insecure and people who live below the poverty line work in agriculture or are farmers. And with the effects of climate we are seeing everywhere, kind of how can we improve their livelihoods and the productivity overall, and help them to kind of face the challenges or cope with the challenges that they're facing.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and how about you, Perry? The quick answer on where you'd like to see AI applied. I have a sense I know what you're going to say, what the topic area is going to be.
Okay, yeah, really agree with Claudia that there are so many topics to apply data science on. Just look at the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. But if I would have to pick a specific area or people in need, I would like to focus on the 70 million refugees that are not sleeping in their own beds tonight. So I think they need information, smart information. So unlocking the power of artificial intelligence to give them better information, where to stay, how to stay safe, and how to improve their livelihoods, focusing, for example, on the Rohingyas in Cox's Bazar would be great. So that's my pledge.
Thank you. How about you, John?
Well, I've talked about online child exploitation, but another area that's really important right now is education. We have 1.6 billion children who've been put out of their schools. We think Save the Children, probably about 10 million won't return to their schools unless there's a major intervention. So we have to understand what factors might keep them away from school. And also for those who go back, or for any of them, we need to understand the learning loss that occurred while they were home and not able to go to school, and how to respond to that. And data could provide a lot of information that will help us with that.
Okay, excellent. And then Amy?
I'm gonna flip this a little bit from a particular topic area to talking about places where I think it's really exciting to see machine learning happen. And I think that's when you have organizations that really are coming at this with the objective of learning, of having a clear idea of the problem that they want to solve, of being willing to work with partners to think through the limitations of what machine learning can do and how to best implement it in practice. I think the one thing I would just want to stress is that, you know, AI and machine learning projects don't happen in a vacuum, and it's really important to think about the broader ecosystem in which they're happening, the skills of the organizations you're going to work with, the kinds of risks that are likely to happen if you have model failures, which will inevitably happen, right? And it's not about aiming for perfection, it's figuring out what's going to be the most effective thing in this problem and how do I plan for and manage those risks. And I think if you have an organization that's willing to work through those problems, both, you know, with the data science experts as well as the domain experts, where you have a background environment that's supportive of learning and where you can take steps to mitigate risks, that's where it really makes sense to explore and take this with kind of a learning approach so that we can get better together.
Excellent. Okay, so we're going to wrap up here. And first, I just so much gratitude to Claudia, John, Amy, and Perry for joining us today, for sharing their insights and drawing on their expertise and experiences. We're really appreciative. I know that the audience is very appreciative, and I just wish that this conversation could keep going. And thank you everyone here for joining us today. Really appreciate your time. We'll be following up with you via email in the next few days, and this video will be posted on our website. And then feel free to reach out to me if you'd like to learn more about Omdena, our projects, the ones presented, other ones that we've done, they're all up on the website, or if you'd like to discuss how Omdena works with nonprofits and NGOs. And then I've just, the screen here is some of our previous demo days. They're all up on the website. You can watch the videos. We've been talking about some really interesting problems and presenting quite a few of our projects. And this is the place to go. You see the URL at the top to keep up with future sessions. We'll be doing more focus topics, and we hope that you'll join us. So thank you everyone for joining us today, and have a good rest of your day. Take care.